From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for coming out on this disgusting rainy day to spend some time with us. Thank you to the co-chairman of the festival, David Rubenstein, and all the sponsors who make this event possible. If I can just ask everyone to make sure that your phones are silenced or turned off. And though I'm sure you all have questions, just please hold them to the end of the conversation. We'll have a little time for you guys to step up. Also, some of you have been in here before, you probably know the drill, but this is being recorded for posterity, so make sure your questions are good ones. I'm going to try to anyways.
No pressure.
Nope, no pressure. I'm really excited to be here this morning with Hari Kunzru and Katie Kitamura to talk about life and marriage in a two-writer household. Not the least because I'm an old bachelor with 3 cats, so this is going to be really educational for me, probably more so than for you guys. Katie Kitamura's latest book is A Seperation. It's an unnerving story about a woman, we never learn her name. She goes to Greece to search for her estranged husband who's disappeared there. I read it and I was kind of creeped out for days afterwards. And I was also realized as I read it that I will never ever examine my life as deeply or as with such precision and thoughtfulness as your narrator does. So it was like sort of a goals situation. Hari Kunzru's latest book is White Tears. That's another one that's going to stick with you for days afterward. It's the story of 2 college kids, one rich, one poor, both white, both obsessed with black music and authenticity. And their lives are kind of turned inside out after they discover this old, what may or may not be a lost blues record from the 30s that may or may not be something more than just a record. So both of those are really great reads that'll stick with you for a long time. Thank you guys so much for being with here today.
Thank you for inviting us.
My pleasure. So I guess we're just going to start with the basics. What is life like with 2 writers and 2 small children in the house? I mean, what's an average day for you?
Well, it involves a lot of coffee early in the game.
I saw that quote in The Guardian about espresso drinks being all that stand between you and creative disaster.
And I wasn't kidding. It really is true. I mean, we get woken up earlier than we would like, and in a less dignified fashion than we would like. And yeah, and the first few hours of the normal business of the preschool run and getting everybody settled, and then finally we both have a coffee in our hands and the ability to escape to our desks.
I mean, stagger up to our desk and sit down. And
I know I'm an editor, not a writer, but I also rely intensely on coffee to get through the morning. What did you not expect about being a 2-writer household? What came as a complete surprise to you?
I mean, often we're asked about, whether it's competitive being in a 2-writer kind of, especially because our books came out within 3 weeks of each other earlier this year. And I just don't, I don't know about you, I just don't feel that at all. I mean, I think we're very different writers. I don't know, I feel like we're both trying to move the project forward in some way, so that's absolutely not an element of the relationship at all. I mean, I think there's...
when we first got together, we used to live in a little studio apartment, and there was a room with a bed and 2 desks facing in opposite directions, and we both wrote novels in there, and I think we discovered that if we could do that and essentially be together more or less 24 hours a day and we're still happy to be in each other's company, that was an indication that we should probably get married and reproduce. So
I think
we went ahead and did that, and then added more obstacles in the shape of little people.
But I think it's also the fact that the practice of writing is actually much more flexible than you think it is. I think, I don't know about you, but when I started writing, I had my rituals, and I thought I needed to write first thing in the morning, kind of between 7 and 11 when I was fresh, and all that goes out the window, certainly once you have children, but even before then, I think, when you're living together and you're trying to make work together, and I think the kind of capaciousness of a relationship and of a fiction writing practice took me by surprise, certainly.
That is something, actually, you anticipated a question I was going to ask, because, there have been whole books dedicated to writers' routines. People are almost religious about it. I get up, I have a cup of hot water, I have to write 5,000 words before 2 p.m., and then, I'm pulling that off the top of my head, but it seems like that's kind of incompatible with a family life.
It really is. I used to be I mean, I call it throat clearing, really. I mean, it used to take me kind of hours of the sort of equivalent of aligning up my pencils on the desk before I could actually feel psychologically capable of sitting down. But now I know that I have really a relatively short time, and I have to be able to kind of access the zone very, very quickly and efficiently. I mean, I have little techniques to get myself into my headspace kind of quickly. I mean, you don't like to write with music on, but I do. So I wear noise-cancelling headphones and make my own sort of space amidst the chaos of the household. And I now am quite good at sort of stripping away the outside world within 10 minutes or so and getting into it.
It's almost like deadline pressure, except you have no idea when the deadline is actually going to be.
Sort of existential deadline. I mean, it's
oh God. That actually sounds like it might be productive for a writing practice.
I mean, it was very good for me in a way to have some constraints when I was single and effectively could spend all day, you know, pretending that I was in touch with the muse. You know, I could waste huge amounts of time, and I find that these days I do much more in much less time because of that pressure.
I mean, I think it was taking me maybe 2 years or a little bit more to write a book before we had children, and then after our son was born, I think I wrote this book, A Separation, in about 9 months. It just, there was some element of you just really have to sit down and get to it. And I mean, when you're promoting a book, you're often asked to kind of describe your working space, and our working space is complete chaos for both of us.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the sort of aesthetic situation where the magazine is going to do the sort of lifestyle spread about
no
it.
apartment therapy.
Unless there's a magazine that wants kind of, you know, kid underwear and half-eaten sandwiches.
Yeah, but you kind of write out of that chaos, and that has started to feel quite good in some way.
How does living together as writers kind of, do you play off each other? Do you edit each other? Are you bouncing ideas off each other? Or is it very like, I have my lane, you have your lane?
Stay out of my lane.
Yeah.
We found what's really, I mean, because Katie's my best reader and my first reader, and in a way you don't want to waste that read. You don't want to be kind of sort of tugging on the sleeve every day and saying, "Is it good?
Yeah.
Am I good?"
Mom,
and you want, and that I think would definitely, you know, if we were both requiring a certain sort of emotional reassurance from each other, that might get things too tangled up. So what we do is we don't really speak about our projects for a very long period of time. I mean, you go off to your room, I go off to my room, and we do our thing. We meet for lunch, we talk about other things. We talk maybe in general terms about our work, but I haven't read a word of the novel that you've been working on for the last year and a half, and same. So, I mean, we'll get to the point of full drafts and hand it over, and actually then, I mean, I think people get very tangled up with what they need from their partner, and what I need from Katie when I give her a draft of my writing is an extremely hard-edged professional read. I don't need her to tell me I'm okay.
I mean, I think, and it's also kind of an exciting moment because we do live and work in the same space, and we do spend 24 hours
a lot
a
of
day
time together.
We spend a lot of time together, and so it's quite exciting in a way to kind of appreciate your partner for this incredible book they've written.
Yeah, the sphere of privacy, to be reminded that there is
really
this
nice
thing going on that you had no idea about at all.
You still feel like I don't actually know everything that is inside his brain, and it's nice to see your partner not in the register of, I love him because he changes the diapers and he unloaded the dishwasher, but it's like this incredible imagination, and this is what has been going on. So it's actually, it's nice. We're together.
Romantic.
It's even romantic. But you know, we spend all this time together, but there is still some kind of amount of privacy between us, I think.
It's interesting that you say that, because one of the things, I think we talked about it a little over email, and I definitely noticed when reading your books, is that there's a little bit of overlap, I think, in some of the themes. They're both very haunted books. That you mentioned that, and I thought, when you said it, I thought, of course, yes, these are both books that are very concerned with, ooh, sorry, I gestured so excitedly I banged my microphone. these are both books that are concerned with various kinds of haunting. Was that was that something you thought about or noticed, or did it just bleed back and forth between you?
I mean, we have meshed into a kind of shared
set of concerns.
Yeah, I think that's true, and our tastes in what we like to read and what we're thinking about kind of overlap considerably.
I mean, I think I would have said our books were completely different, but then as they've been out in the world, I mean, I think we did a reading together once, and we both read things that were specifically about vocal performance, and specifically about something uncanny in this vocal performance, and specifically even about grief in some levels. So then you realize that actually we are sitting around thinking about the same things, but they have come out in totally different ways, because no two people will write even the exact same story the same way.
Stylistically, we're very different writers.
Yeah.
That's true. When I was reading the books, that was sort of the first thing that came to me, was that just stylistically they were so different. Their approach to dialogue and to character was so different. But then, as I kind of dug deeper, there were these little parallels. And you mentioned the performance, the music, the vocal music. I mean, both books sort of turn a little bit on an almost supernatural vocal performance. The other thing that I guess actually, I mean, I've just been talking about how your voices are different, but I wonder, with my friends that I've known for 30 years, we all start talking alike eventually. I mean, there are shared intonations, shared speech rhythms, shared in-jokes that just become embedded so deeply into the way that you talk that you don't even know that you're doing it. Is that something that you have to watch out for now that you're living in such close quarters?
I mean, there's an issue because you're English and I'm American, but now we both each spent about a decade in the other person's
Yeah, we have a
country.
terrible vocabulary problem going on in that neither of us is now secure on what is English
now?
usage
Sadly.
and what is US usage, and
we can't trust each other to catch it in our
and we're both the children of immigrants as well. I mean, and so there's a kind of deracinated English that's going on in our household, and also increasingly we're reading more and more fiction in translation as well. So there's that going on also. I mean, I like that, and I'm interested in that, because that seems to be something that's happening to English anyway. I mean, English is a world language, and I saw some sort of statistic that somehow that's something like 60% of English conversations are between two non-native speakers now, which is, I mean, what does that mean for the way that the language functions? So, I mean, I'd like to think that our kind of head scratching about whether the word, what was the one I had the other day? I wanted somebody to be hit over the head, and I used the word kosh, which
That's
turns
British.
out to
That's
be
not-
super British,
Yeah,
and
it's very
I thought
British.
that
I mean,
was
I caught that one.
and yeah, but I mean, maybe it is productive that sort of thing is
I mean,
going
one
on.
thing that's interesting is if you have to stop and wonder about your usage, you become aware of it, and that is surely useful for a writer.
I mean,
so it's never just like language that falls into your head. It's actually you have to stop and think, does that even make sense for this character? And so maybe that small degree of separation is useful for you.
I mean, you once told me that you sort of aspired to write as if it had been translated out of another
I think that's true. That slight level of remove is useful. But I mean, it's something that I've always thought about in slightly kind of intellectual terms, and then you realize it comes back to biography, and it is because I am the children of two Japanese immigrants. English was a second language in my household, and then whenever my parents spoke English, it was very much their second language. So there was always a slight question about the correctness of usage.
And that's interesting, because the main character in Seperation is a translator.
Yeah.
Was that something you were consciously thinking about, or did it just kind of arise naturally?
I think that idea of being not entirely at home in your language was something that I was definitely thinking about. I mean, we often, the phrase lost in translation is so familiar to us, but I was actually more interested in this question of what is added in a translation, because it's effectively like another person is now writing or voicing a book with you. So when a book is translated into another language, you have the author and the translator, and they kind of make that book together in the second language. And I think for this book in particular, which is so much about being haunted by another presence, that felt useful to me.
There was a quote I think I saw in an interview with you where you talked about a translator saying, "I look forward to writing your book in French." Was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was great.
Yeah.
The idea of creating the book again in another language. I wonder if sort of, and this just occurred to me, that writing is a way of making a home in language if you were feeling kind of between several cultures.
I think absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
both of us have such a sort of deep love for books, and we do make our world out of those books, no matter where we are. I mean, we have as a couple moved around to various places, and
I mean, I think because one of the things I love about Hari's work and his brain in general is that he can seize hold of a situation very, very quickly and write about it. And so I think you've actually, from living in America, from living in Berlin, you've used those experiences and you've actually written in the voices of people who are native to those places, in a way. And I don't know if that's part of finding.
I think it's just foolish, really, isn't it? It's like kind of. But I do stumble into the middle of things, and then it's too irresistible to not. It's irresistible to write about them, and so I do end up writing in voices that are very distant from my own, and about experiences that are quite distant from my own. I mean, I also like research more than you do. I'm a much more of a kind of, internet, drift kind of dude.
Yes. No, I mean, when you just the kind of nuts and bolts of it is I often farm out research to Hari, so I'll say, I need...
Yeah, she can kind of drop it casually at the lunch table. I wonder what that would be about, and I'll then be, oh yeah. And so I'll end up kind of doing an hour.
Later, it's amazing. I'm kind of upstairs working on my book, and then an hour later I get an email with links to everything. So it's really, really useful.
She knows how to manipulate my compulsions.
It's a strong marriage right there. No, and actually, that distaste for research pops up in Christopher, who's the missing husband, because his wife is pretty salty about the fact that he's disappeared to Greece researching.
Yes. I mean, because I think books are so funny because for me they operate much more like kind of dreams, in that it's not that X is Y, it's more that the author is all the characters. And so that element of Christopher is definitely my self-loathing about my inability. I can be researching a book and never go to a library for years, I would say. So yeah.
Research is so fun. That's the most fun part. Then, when you actually
I'll be sending you emails with my questions. You have to watch it.
No, I don't want to step on your turf. No. But no, once you're done researching,
there's enough to go around, believe me.
And you're sitting there, you're done research, and you're sitting there with the blank page, and that's the terrifying part for me.
I just find things kind of pop up out of research. It's always, if you actually look at something, it's always stranger than the version that you imagined. If you kind of try and make it up out of whole cloth, you go for the easiest version of it, and the world is always more peculiar than we dream of. And what I get out of research isn't so much kind of lists of facts and dates, but tone and odd details that to me then are really useful as a sort of prosthetic for my imagination. I mean, I can be very at sea if I haven't got something to hold on to, but even if it's a quite weird little inconsequential thing, I can then spin something out of that.
There were a lot of times when I was reading White Tears, especially in the earlier passages talking about Carter and Seth, the two college kids at their school in upstate New York, when I thought, I probably knew those guys. They rang so true to me, even though I was a little bit before them and in Western Mass, but not upstate New York. But that's they were archetypal. I thought that.
They turn up in British versions too. Believe me.
I feel like I had this written down, and I was sort of wondering whether or not it was a corny question, but. We've kind of gotten there already, the old trope of writing what you know and how much of the author is in the books, especially with A Separation, which is about a troubled marriage and a woman who's very distant from her emotions and from her marriage and from her husband who's now missing.
Caddish English husband.
He does seem kind of...
non-fiction writer.
I would call him a prat.
All right, that's the fig leaf, is it?
So how much of your own marriage leaches through into your work?
I think I'm going to give that one to you there.
I mean, I
Mrs.
guess
Missing Husband.
my German editor, when I saw him, he said that he's going to say, whatever about your book, and he said, yeah, it really is the dream of every person that you wake up and your partner has disappeared. And I thought,
It's a very German thing to say.
I mean, I think
That's a little more revealing than he intended, I think.
I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that I mean, Hari is a brilliant writer of writing of the present moment, and I think I'm a writer who takes much longer to process what is happening to me and around me. And I mean, I wrote the book, I don't know what I thought it was about. Maybe I thought it was about marriage. And then I realized after I'd written it that it was a book about grief, and that it was a book about my father in a lot of ways, who died now 8 years ago. And some part of me is still kind of worrying over that. And I mean, and then when I started thinking about it, I realized that the germ of the book was in a visit I made to Yerlimenos, which is a village in the book in Greece, in the southern Peloponnese. And I went there after my dad had been sick with cancer for quite a long time, and it was there that I accepted that he was going to die, and quite soon. And so that tone of grief colored everything about that landscape, and the book came out of that landscape. So when you look at the book, there's actually not that much, I don't think, about marriage, but there is a great deal about grief and about not being able to process grief. So I think the distance that the narrator has from her emotions is really a kind of trauma, and a kind of, it's like, because we have children, if they fall over, you're not worried if they're crying, because they're kind of okay. It's really that kind of moment when they're completely still and no emotion is there that you worry about if they're okay or not. And so in a way, the quandary for my narrator is that she can never get to the point of actually expressing her grief. So.
Yeah, I'm used to reading things that resolve neatly at the end, so it was very interesting for me to get to the end of a separation and go, this is closer to real life than I'm comfortable with.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that is so funny about a novel, is that we pretend that these narratives have a beginning, middle, and end, and they don't, and they're ongoing. And I mean, even in my experience of writing it, it was that something that had happened to me almost a decade ago continues to operate on my psyche in some way, and it keeps coming back, and it keeps coming back. And I think that was something I wanted to try to get in the book, which is that these narratives are open-ended. They do carry on. They return in unexpected ways. I mean, that's also a kind of theme in White Tears as well.
Kind of open-endedness of...
Yeah, and hauntings, and these things we try to pretend they've been resolved and this is all done, but they don't resolve like that. They come back.
I mean, ghost stories, I mean, the book this book is kind of it's a ghost story among other things, and they are always about something that has been, people have attempted to prematurely bury, prematurely suppress, and that has come back up unbidden to haunt the present day. I mean, and that for me was a way that I could speak about race and history and the kind of troubled history of that, especially here. It seemed like a useful frame for that.
That one, my expertise is kind of in genre fiction, and I always sort of, the thing that I came up with is that people read genre fiction because real life doesn't have narrative. Genre fiction tends to have a story arc, a quest. It may not have a happy ending, but it generally has an ending. And so it was very interesting for me to sort of break away from that and be in a much more uncertain space.
But I'm interested in that, the structures that genre fiction does give to our experience. As you say, there's something comforting about a story that resolves. There's something comforting about things that will proceed along a familiar path. And I suppose that what interests me is the way that we sometimes try and frame our lives like that, and that the genre does offer kind of clues to things that are quite profound about human experience, but there is never that neat resolution, and things bleed away from those structures. And so, I mean, I'm quite interested in the point where genre sort of breaks down, and I think you can still have the fun and the pleasure of things that are shaped like stories, but not necessarily need to tie them up in neat little bows.
I want to sort of go back to the idea of both books to a certain extent being about grief and haunting and these sort of similar ideas. Do you ever come up with an idea while you're writing and think, oh, my husband could do this better, or my wife could do this better? Is there kind of, do you know each other's?
Yeah, I mean, we know. We do collaborate on doing some screenwriting, and so that's the space in which we can actually, you know, full-bloodedly kind of share our proclivities.
Proclivities is such a good word.
I mean, I'm trying to think if there is. I mean, if I could give a straight answer to that question. I mean, there must be situations like that. I mean, I know there's material that I think of as yours, and tone that I think of as yours.
I mean, I feel like the novels are so personal that I mean, maybe in the future, but.
But I mean, you can only write like yourself. It's like, I mean, because I admire Katie's work, I have inevitably been influenced to try to steer some of my tone towards something that feels more like hers, and it comes out sounding like me, and which is maybe that's good. I mean, maybe that's
now that I think about that. It was a really editorial question, because half of my job is thinking, okay, I have this writer, and this book would be a great book for them to review. You know? I
mean, we wrote something together for a publication called Triple Canopy, and it was an idea that I'd had, and I kept trying to get Hari to write it because it felt like something he would do really well, and it was a kind of, I mean, I guess it's a kind of satirical piece about the privatization of language in the future. And I think I ended up writing the bulk of it because I was commissioned to do it for performance, but then we collaborated on it.
Well, then Katie doesn't like to, I mean, you didn't want to perform your piece,
yes,
so
that's right.
I stood on a stage and performed her piece and then took questions in the character, and that inevitably sort of added material, and then that was transcribed and we wrote that up, and so by the end of it there was it was very hard to say, you know.
That sounds almost like that experience itself could be fodder for some kind of collaborative work.
It was quite a good form, actually. I thought it was useful.
One thing that I always wonder about with writers who have children is, and sometimes I feel bad for writers' kids, honestly, naming no names, but they sometimes end up in their parents' fiction whether they want to be there or not. And I know that you have 2 small children. How are you thinking about that?
Hasn't really come up at the moment. I mean, my main experience is that there are things that I wrote about before I was a father that I wouldn't write about now. I mean, I wrote a book about a family whose little boy disappears, and I could not do that now. I just couldn't live inside that.
That was Gods Without Men?
Yes, and I wouldn't be able to write that book now because I think I would find it just too troubling to have to be in that space all the time. I mean, there's actually a lot of TV shows about missing children that I can't watch now. But in terms of sort of violating their privacy in the future, I won't do it intentionally. I can pledge that.
Intentionally. You're on tape now, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm prepared to sign my name to that. But I'm always slightly suspicious of writers who assert their writerly privilege in order to trash their families' lives. You know, I think it takes a great amount of ego about the value of your own work to do that in an unself-conscious way. And I mean, the situation hasn't arisen, but I feel that I would want to respect their right. I mean, you know, to not be anatomized before they're able to make their own personalities and their own lives and their own ways of defining themselves. I don't know, what do you...
Well, I don't know.
Writing about the kids, is that what you're doing upstairs?
No, because I mean, like I said, because I had this incredible delay and I end up writing about things 10 years later, I just can't even imagine writing about them at all. I mean, I don't think I've written a character who has children. Is that right? I don't know why I'm asking you. Sorry.
Well, you should ask me because I've been crab reading your books all week, but I can't. I don't think you have.
So I don't think I have. So I don't know what that would look like. I don't know what that.
Yeah, I mean we're far from that. I mean we haven't even invaded each other's privacy properly yet.
No, I think we should exhaust each other.
Work on that, right?
Language
Maybe I'm projecting because I feel like if I was a writer, I would not be able to resist a well of material living in my own house, you know?
But I think
it's funny. It doesn't feel like material, does it?
It doesn't.
To me, it just doesn't. And I mean, I think, and it's also, I think it's interesting how material ends up in your work. I mean, I think there's a kind of element in my book where the central character doesn't really know what her role is. She's separated from her husband, but they're not officially separated, so she's neither wife nor ex-wife. And I think part of that came out because I had just become a mother, and I was trying to figure out what that meant and what that meant for my own identity. But that's how it turns up in the book. It's not a kind of mother who is stressed out about, you know, it comes out for me.
It's that sort of transposition that's the thing. I mean, I think if you know, I mean, we're obviously always taking from our real lives and all the time, but you transpose, you don't use the furniture in a way, you use something about the tone, you use some sort of emotional structure that you're in or you've discovered. And that way you can completely mine all your friends and family and acquaintances all the time without actually doing the thing that people find troubling and offensive, which is being sort of pinned to the board, like, you know, specimens.
Although we did have a friend of ours her father is a remarkable character, and both of us have always felt he would be a remarkable character, and we've both been tempted, but have not done it. And then we found out that another writer is doing is currently
actually shadowing him and it's extraordinary.
See, I always think like I would be sort of honored if one of my writer friends put me in a book, but that's just because a friend of mine got written into a Doctor Who novel as a villain, and I've always been really jealous about that.
That is something to be jealous of.
Speaking of British culture. So I wanted to ask just one more sort of general question about being in there's a line in a Jezebel interview where you described marriage as an insane, deranged wager.
Yes.
Is that marriage in general? Marriage as two writers? I want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's partially in reference to something that Alain Badiou wrote, this French philosopher. He'd written this book about how increasingly love is being metricated. So you have online dating, matching profiles, and all the risk is kind of being drained away from love.
It's turned into shopping.
And it's turned into shopping. And in fact, love should feel like a tremendous leap of faith. And there's no reason to go into a marriage if you think you're just going to coast along to the end. And I think that's true. And I think I'm a romantic in that sense, that there has to be the sense that you're doing
in a way,
something.
that's the meaning of marriage, isn't it? Is you stand up and you take this risk. You say, I'm going to try and love you forever. And that's, how can you say that? You can't say that. But the very fact that you're going to try is this leap of faith, and that's what gives it meaning, and that's what gives it value as a ritual, as a pledge, and it makes it different from this kind of quasi shopping like dating culture that we all have participated in.
Yeah, I think that was what I probably meant when I said that.
So it's almost like writing a book and launching it into the world. I'm being informed that we have about 10 minutes left. Okay. So it might be time to have some questions from the audience. I can't see you guys out there because the lights are so bright, but we have 2 microphones here on either side. So if anybody has questions and they want to step up here, don't be afraid, we don't bite. I mean, I don't know, I don't.
They're just leaving.
Oh, hi, Madeline.
Hi, Petra.
Hi.
I'm interested, since Petra brought up your children, you are both from immigrant families. Hari, I know you're British Asian, now you live in America, Japanese American. What is the culture how do you bring up your children in that milieu, and how does that affect the language that they'll use? I particularly think of British English because I'm from there too, and my children still give me a hard time about some of the words that I use, but it's a very interesting mix, and I think as writers, obviously you think about words all the time. I'm curious as to how you think about the words your children, with such an interesting background from both of you.
We both of us have had the kind of break from our parents' first language. I mean, I wasn't brought up speaking Hindi. My mum's English and my dad's Indian, and they took the decision not to speak Hindi to me, or my father took the decision not to speak Hindi to me and my brother in the home in order not to sort of alienate my mother, and that means that I don't have that. I mean, when I go to see my family in India, and they would naturally speak in a kind of flowing in and out of Hindi and English, they just skew towards English when I need to be included, and then skew away again. And you, I mean, your brother is fluent in Japanese. Your older brother, but you were born over here, and
my brother's fluent in Japanese. He was born in Japan. I was brought up in California, and it was a bilingual household until I was 5, and then I went to kindergarten, and my English was behind, and so my parents were advised to stop speaking Japanese to me in the home, which is now, you would never say that to a family. So my Japanese is poor at best, and it's something I think I really deeply regret. And when I look at our children who should maybe
be trilingual,
but will be, very monolingual, unless we do something about it. So I think now, as they're getting older, I do kind of think. I
mean, what they do have is a sense of culture as something multiple and something that's constructed within a family. I mean, I think that's something. I mean, they have. There's the grandparents in London. There's a family in North India. There's the family in California. There's family in Japan, and so they know that in a way that we've taken this decision to be together and to make our little family, which is not shaped like other families. So I think they understand that each family does do that work, because even if you're all from the same place and you don't move around, you are still making a culture as a family unit. So I mean, how that will play out, we don't know. But I mean, we have these conversations about how to keep them in touch with aspects of our cultures that we want to keep hold of, much the same as all immigrants do have.
Yeah, I'm interested in ultimately how it's going to affect the English that.
You mean
the English? Yeah, I mean, they have some.
Our son's definitely got a funny little English accent going on there in the middle of his.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the influence of school is so strong that once they're really school age, I think it tends to fall away.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we'll see, that once he's got a peer group in grade school, then that will presumably be his primary cultural influence.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question if anybody wants to step up to the mic. Anybody out there? Gosh, you guys are so quiet. Here comes somebody. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. That was really, really helpful. I was wondering, you said that there was a set of shared concerns that you have, even though obviously your work is really different aesthetically and tonally, stylistically. And maybe you could talk about what those set of shared concerns are.
Like, question.
Or not.
What do we
In 5
share?
minutes. Can you do it in 5 minutes?
I mean, I think both of us have, for biographical reasons that we've outlined here, we've got a sense of not being in the center of the worlds that we occupy. I mean, I have habitually written narrators and characters who are somehow at an angle to the situation that they find themselves in, and that perspective, I think we both share, because we have moved around and we have had similar sets of experiences in some way, even though, I mean, the actual places we grew up couldn't have been more different. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe there's an interest in trying to work out how to play with narrative. So, I mean, I think, as we mentioned a little bit, my book kind of avoids this strong finish, I guess you might say. And then Hari, I mean, this book is very, very propulsive, and it's almost the opposite direction, but I think it's the same concern in a funny way about narrative drive and how you subvert narrative drive or you exploit narrative drive. And certainly in Gods Without Men, you were interested in doing something which is a book that is really told in shards, and it has many, many narratives about how you play around with this idea of a kind of more conventional linear narrative, and you do something different with it. So I think we also have, they kind of express themselves in very different ways, but I think we both, for example, would have an interest in form and narrative. Maybe. Do we have any? We must have more. We must have more.
List of shared stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I just have one more quick question before I think we have like 2 minutes left. Do you have any advice, any pearls of wisdom for people trying to make a go of a two-writer household?
I would say, yeah, don't mistake the bedroom for the desk.
Sage advice.
And by that, I sort of mean that, you know, you want love and support, and you want to be absolutely secure with your partner, and you want a reader and a critic to tell you the truth about your work. And those are two very separate sorts of things. And don't mistake somebody saying that's not working for I don't love you.
I think it's really important to be willing to continue to give your partner the space to step away from the family to do the work, which sometimes they do need to be able to do. And I think you have to respect that. And it's hard to kind of say, yes, take those 2 weeks to go away and work on your book and I'll be here with the kids. And we've both done that for each other, but it's really important, and it's important. I mean, you know what it takes to write a book, and you know when somebody, and you also have to be sensitive. Sometimes, you know, one or the other of us will need that time more than the other, and then you need to give it to that person and trust that it'll come full circle. And when you're in that place in your writing, that you will also be given that time. I mean, I think it's dangerous to fall into a kind of scorekeeping of hours of who has more time to work. But just instead, kind of, you know, we're all trying to get to the same place, which is to finish our books. So.
Well, thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.